Teddy, you're on mute. You've been on mute, Teddy.
Sorry about that. Shireen, a warm welcome. We can see you. Let's just make sure we can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. A warm welcome to all the panelists. Everybody is joining us. We're also streaming live on YouTube Israel, Telfed Israel, and we're just waiting now for one more panelist to join. Dov, with your permission, we could probably start. He did say he was stuck in traffic, but I have no way of knowing. So I don't know if you all know each other. I think you probably do know each other from your field of political field. So if anybody doesn't know anybody, raise your hand and I will introduce. Okay, so having said that, then a warm welcome to everybody. And first of all, I'd like to call on Doron Klein, our Telfed CEO, to bring greetings and a few words.
Thank you, Teddy. I want to welcome all our esteemed panelists. It's wonderful to have you with us this evening. A big thank you to our moderator, Rabbi Dov Lipman, who's been instrumental in helping us to put this evening together. And a big also kol hakavod to Teddy and to our staff member, Aviva, Teddy, our volunteer, and Aviva, the staff, for putting the evening together. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot from all of you. So before we start, we're just going to spend just 2-3 minutes understanding the organization that's behind this evening, and that is Telfed, the South African Zionist Federation, Israel. And so with your permission, we're just going to spend just 2-3 minutes on the organization so you know a bit about us and why we're here this evening. So Telfed is our nickname in Tel Aviv Federation from 1948 when our offices were in Tel Aviv. Our official name, South African Zionist Federation Israel. We are independent from the South African Zionist Federation, but carry that name with pride, going back to our founding fathers in 1948, when we looked after the 800 South African Machal soldiers who came to volunteer in the War of Independence. We look to see what the organization does now, 72 years later. So Klita is the heart of Telfed. We are involved in Aliyah promotion in South Africa and Australia. We also now assisting Olim from the United Kingdom. You can see the numbers of Olim last year who came from South Africa and Australia. And we help the Olim with Aliyah advice, and we welcome them when they arrive, when we're allowed to, when the airports open. And we're in constant contact with them, regular contact during their first year of Aliyah, and then after that, as long as is necessary. We have a special division dealing with lone soldiers. You can see 170 lone soldiers. They need a lot of help while they're in the army, and especially after they are finished their army service, to get reabsorbed into Israeli society. We're the only organization that provides housing. We have 105 apartments that belong to Telfed. We rent them out to our Olim at 30% below market rates. So it's subsidized housing for up to 3 years. And it's a soft landing for our Olim. And 70% of the income from our apartments goes here to help the needy. We support 450 needy Olim every month. It's financial assistance with food cards and social work counseling. We have now online events. We hope soon to go back to face-to-face events with, you can see, thousands of participants every year, and that's climbing. And you're all welcome to subscribe to our newsletter that goes out to over 10,000 recipients. Please be very active on Facebook and Instagram. Please join us. And the Telfed magazine that goes out before Pesach and Rosh Hashanah. That's how we keep in touch with our community of Southern African and Australian Olim. We provide over 400 scholarships every year. The scholarships are both for those in financial need, and there's a separate track for those who do 3 hours of community service a week, and a special scholarship for those who come to study in Israel that haven't yet made Aliyah and are trying out the waters and studying here and then deciding whether to make Aliyah. Here you can see we received the scholarships. We gave out our scholarships outside the Knesset. We have 250 volunteers involved in Telfed. Each one of the blocks that you see on the screen is also a department in Telfed run by staff and volunteers. And we have a special volunteer program teaching English to Ethiopian Olim. And the last square that you see here is our employment department, pre-Aliyah and Klita, counseling, seminars, and a whole group of mentors. If any of you would like to be a mentor, if you're an expert in your field, be a mentor for our Olim and help them to get absorbed into the employment market in Israel. So there we go. That's the organization in a nutshell. It's an honor for us to host you this evening. Thank you again to Dov, and I hand over back to you, to Teddy.
Thank you, Doron. Annette, it's an honor. We're still making sure that Simcha Rothman is here. Dov, it's up to you. You want to go ahead without Simcha? He hasn't joined us.
Okay, we're absolutely going to get started. It's absolutely an honor to have everyone. Thank you to all the candidates.
1 second, can I just introduce you officially and then you can take over from me? Sorry about that. Past MK Dov Lipman, moderator. Dov was a member of the 19th Knesset of Israel, today Secretary General of the Confederation of the United Zionists. Dov, thank you so much for giving of your time and for this lovely evening. Ruth, good to see you. Welcome. Dov.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Telfed for organizing. We know that everybody who's watching doesn't want to hear us speaking, but wants to hear the candidates. So we're going to get right to it. We are going to keep to time that each person has for their different time slots. So please make sure I'll be timing it as well. We don't want to have to ask anyone to stop. So we're starting with opening statements that are 2 minutes. This is your chance to really make your pitch to all those who are watching and listening. We're going to start with the Likud, former member of Knesset, Yehuda Glick. You're on for 2 minutes for your opening statement. Please unmute yourself.
Shalom, shalom to all of you. I don't know how do you say in English, Erev shel ha'arat panim lechulam, but I apologize that I'm not a very good English speaker. I speak American, but I really would like to thank the host, Telfed, and our dignified moderator, Dov, for the privilege to be here and speak to such an honorable crowd and such dignified panel colleagues, of whom I strongly respect. Shalom, my dear friend Sharon Haskell. Welcome home to my dear friend Nachman Shai. And of course to Simcha Rothman and Moshe Kinley and Laura and my new acquaintance Ruth. Nice to meet you all. Shalom to you all. I would actually say that I'm quite excited to be here, and I wish you would all be running with me together on the Likud. As first speaker, I want to allow myself to share with you my thoughts about these elections. I feel...
Yehuda, you have 1 minute.
1 minute, great. I feel in the past years, the art of civil disagreement is on the wane. Civil discourse gives way to shaming and shunning. Often, this is infused with zealous self-righteousness. Adopting such a posture allows people to label others, not only as contraries, but sometimes as fools or other appellations I prefer not to repeat. This justifies abandonment of civility. In the past 2 years, we have gone through 4 elections, all on one topic, banning Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as if he was Satan himself. This has not only failed again and again, but is leading to a kind of an anarchy. Let's face the facts. According to the polls, the only one who may have a chance to form a government if he just gets a few more seats is Prime Minister Netanyahu. I don't think he's Messiah or perfect, in spite of the vaccinations and the major processes he has promoted. But I do believe that a 5th election will be really too much. We need stability. The Likud, a diverse party, reaching out with goodwill. Let's put all the other issues aside, care for the country. We need it. Am Yisrael deserves it.
Thank you so much, Yehuda. Move on for opening statement to member of Knesset Sharon Haskell from the New Hope Party.
Former member of Knesset.
I
resigned from my seat and returned the mandate back to the Likud party to join Gideon Sa'ar on his road to change Netanyahu's leadership. After seeing and crossing many red lines that we didn't think Netanyahu will ever cross them, we realized and understood that this change have to happen. Before we entered these rounds of elections, there was no chance even ahead of time to actually make a difference and make a change and change Netanyahu. But now that Gideon Sa'ar decided to run as a candidate to the Prime Minister's office, there's actually a chance to make that change. But unfortunately, if New Hope party is not going to be big enough, I'm actually quite concerned that it will either mean that Bennett will rejoin Netanyahu in giving him the 61 mandates to continue to be the leader of Israel, or we might find ourselves in another round of election. The only one who can replace him is Gideon Sa'ar. We are a right-wing liberal party in Israel. We call on the other parties after the elections, obviously, to sit with us under the principles of having Israel as a Jewish and a democratic state. Some of our principle is how to reinforce the power of Israel, the national power, but not just security and military-wise, but also from an economical point of view and technological point of view. We have a plan on how to get Israel out of this economical crisis that we're facing, the health crisis that we've been in for the last year, that they've miserably failed in managing it here in Israel. And I'll continue afterwards to answer more questions if there is.
Okay, absolutely. We have plenty more questions to ask. And by the way, for all those who are watching, we're also going to have an opportunity for each candidate to ask one other candidate a question. So all the candidates can be thinking about those questions as well. Moving on to the Blue and White Party, member of Knesset Ruth Wasserman Lundy. You have 2 minutes.
First of all, I'm very homesick. I hear the South African accent and I feel very much at home. So thank you for inviting me. And Yuda, I'm just as glad as you are to have this newly found friendship. So thank you. I want to share with you that a couple of days ago, I stood on in the plenary in the Knesset, and for the International Women's Day, I asked everybody, ministers, members of Knesset, the general public, both Arab and Jewish, and I do spend quite some time on the Arab affairs within Israel, to speak a little bit more gently to one another. Maybe it sounds very naive, but after spending 3 years in Egypt, I think I'm very far from being naive. But I do think that the aggressive discourse, and here I do agree with Yuda, not precisely on the direction of the comment, but on the comment in essence that the aggressive discourse in the country needs to change. And I think that Blue and White Party, in essence and in epitome, very much epitomizes that message. It's a group of people with values. If we put cynicism aside for 1 second, we've been checks and balances for whatever's happening within the government. I've been in Parliament for 1 month. And in 9 different committees, and seeing it from inside really enhances the feeling from outside that these checks and balances, exactly as Sharon has said, they need to be there. They need to be there in terms of not allowing a one-sided view to simply rule. It's not saying it's bad, it's not saying it's good, it's saying that democratic, pluralistic, inclusive visions need to have checks and balances. And the Blue and White Party has very, very strongly given that to the public at a huge political expense. And I think that should be taken into account. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Moving on to the 2-minute opening statement from the Religious Zionist Party, Simcha Rotman. 2 minutes. Please go on mute. Off mute.
Hi, shalom everyone. First, you have to speak in Hebrew. We say "Potchim b'chvod achsania." You open and say to the host. So I feel thankful for the Olim from South Africa, because my wife's grandfather made Aliyah in 1948, 49 from South Africa. Thanks South Africa, and thanks to all the Olim from South Africa for my wife. And also a lot of family that I have in Australia. Some of them made Aliyah, some of them are still there. So I feel the connection with this wonderful organization. I think the major issue that we need to take into account when voting in the new election is what kind of government we're going to have. Many people, for their own interest, will try to convince us that the question is who will be the prime minister. If elections in Israel were about the identity of the prime minister, and maybe people that comes from other countries and you do direct elections to the prime minister or the president, can think that's the issue, then Benjamin Netanyahu won election after elections for many, many years. But the government that we had in the past years are different. There are a lot of difference between those governments. The government that we had between 2013 and 2015 was not a right-wing government because Lapid and Livni were part of this government. It did not push forward a right-wing policy.
About 10 seconds.
Okay, and so the way we will have the coalition, if we will have, for the first time in many years, 100% right-wing coalition, the difference will be big, huge, and that's the reason to vote right.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the opening statement for the Amina party. Jeremy Sultan, please unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I also have to start by thanking Telfed, just because my brother-in-law, Seth, was very much helped by you guys when he was here in Israel, and because of your work, he made Aliyah. Thanks to you, he married my sister. I have nephews and nieces, so thank you for your work. It's very much appreciated. My name is Jeremy Sultan. I'm married to Cheryl. I'm father to Mimi, Mikey, Gabby, and Ellie. Live in Mevaseret Zion. I made Aliyah from Chicago, Illinois. But this election isn't about me. It's about you. We've had this government now for about 10 months. And the reason we're going to this election is because it was the most dysfunctional, terrible government that we've had in the history of the state. This is just a government that did not care about you. This is a government that just did absolutely nothing for you. And what we're looking to do is replace the government. But unlike what people will tell you from left or right, what we're doing here is actually providing plans. You know, I know a lot of people want to go ahead and do things, but we have a Singapore plan in terms of what we want to do with the economy. We have a plan in terms of what we want to do of bringing Corona to zero from a health perspective. We have a plan in terms of how to restart the education. We have a plan in terms of how to deal with the housing crisis. Elections should be about policy. It should be about plans that the parties are putting forth and asking the public and the voters if they want to go forward and go with them. This question is not about who's going to win this little class president contest, as some of the people here might make you think is the most important question. What we need to do is put together a government which is actually going to work for you, who cares about the issues that you care about, so that we can go ahead and bring Israel to a place where, instead of all of the Israeli natives telling us, oh, you have a American or South African or Australian citizenship, I'd like to switch with you. Instead, we'll have a situation where all of our friends from back home are going to want to join us here in Israel, because we're going to make it the best country ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Moving on to the Labor Party, former member of Knesset, Nachman Shai. Just press unmute, and you have 2 minutes for the opening statement.
Yeah, I'm not on mute any longer. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you for Telfed for this organizing this event, and I'm very glad to meet all my colleagues of mine from the past and maybe from the future too. Yehuda, don't smile so much. And my dear friend Sharon and Ruti is a newcomer to the Knesset. So good evening, everyone. I'm on the labor list to the Knesset. And I'm very proud to see this old and veteran party coming back to life under the leadership of Merav Michaeli. This is kind of resurrection that we are all witnessing now in our lifetime. That's something that I couldn't believe it will ever happen, but it does. And it means a lot to me and to many, many Israelis that find themselves back in the labor. And I'm not sure we'll be able to regain the same power that we've had in the past, but at least we can see the party back, and the party that will be hopefully a major player in the political scene in Israel. We are located on the political spectrum from center to left, leaving a lot of space to Meretz to take over the left wing of the political party, which I hope very much they will be able to do. We feel that we should fill the gap between the center and the left politically, where we've been for many, many years. We will be carrying and hoisting the same flags in the past. The security and the political one, looking for two nation state for two people, and the rest which comes with it. And on the social economic spectrum, to present Israel with a social democratic ideology, hoping very much to correct all the mistakes that have been committed by the outgoing government, and hopefully to join with other parties that some of the representatives are now on the panel, to form a new coalition that will be able to heal Israel from all the wounds that we have been suffered in the past over a year. The Israeli people deserve to see new government, new coalition, and especially new prime minister. So I'm looking forward for a very interesting panel, but more than that, in 2 weeks' time, to see a new government and a new prime minister in Israel. Thank you, and good evening to everyone.
Thank you, Nachman. Moving on for the opening statement from Yesh Atid, member of Knesset, Moshe Torpaz. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So good evening to you all. As that person made Aliyah when I was 1 year old, I'm very privileged to be with you, with Alfred. My parents made Aliyah before me in the 50s from England, so I really kind of feel at home here. Look, I come from the educational area. I was head of a principal of a school, a high school, and then I led the educational system of Jerusalem. I joined Yesh Atid because I believe this country belongs to all of us. And some people see themselves more privileged than others, so they want only a right-centered government or a left-centered government. I grew up in the religious Zionist environment to see all Israelis as my brothers. And as a family of Olim, I always looked at all Israelis and said, I want to be their brother. And Yesh Atid is a centered a party, and we see ourselves as being an important part of this country. I don't want to say to anybody, he's not my brother, he's not my friend. I don't want to have only half of the people feeling here at home, like happened in the last few years. And I must say, I must agree with whoever said here, we've been seeing this government failing on any mission it had for the last year. The corona is a tremendous failure running of Israel, and the Likud has been here for the last 12 years leading this government, and we need a big change. So Yesh Atid will be leading this change, not on its own. I'm well aware of the friends here that I hope to be in a government with them, and I deeply believe that we can make a much better future for Israel today, and we're working very hard for it, and I'll talk more about it in the rest of the evening. Thank you, Dov.
Thank you so much. And the final opening statement, and by the way, we went in alphabetical order. We'll go in reverse alphabetical order for the closing statements at the end, just to keep everything fair. City Councilwoman from Meretz, Laura Wharton, 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good evening. And I'll also just say it was a pleasure to hear about Telfed. It sounds like you do wonderful things, and kol hakavod to you. I'll just say a bit about Meretz. What Meretz is known for is its work, among other things, and primarily for social justice and equality. We are a party that dealt with things like minimum wage. We passed the public housing bill, which brought about a minor revolution. We've been involved in public health, and thanks to us, there is still a public health system, despite Netanyahu and others' attempts to destroy it. It's what's saving us today. We've had a number of education ministers. We put a lot of emphasis on education. We're the only party that till the end fought to preserve a basic curriculum that was trashed by the Likud governments, unfortunately. There is now no required curriculum. That is, any schools can get government support without having a basic curriculum. We led the struggle for equality for women. We're the first party to ensure a kind of, how do you call it? That there be women's representations, not only in our own party, but we put in a request to the election committee so that ultra-Orthodox women would also have be represented, and the first ultra-Orthodox woman to serve in the Knesset, the only one to date, was from Meretz. We've also pioneered the struggle for equality for people with disabilities, and got through all the laws that set up requirements for accessibility of all kinds. We also, of course, work for equality and justice for the Bedouin, Druze, and Muslim minorities in the country. And I would really say this is a basic principle of ours. We also, of course, as part of this idea of equality, want to make sure that we will be freed of the territories, and so that the Palestinians can also have their own country, and we can guarantee equality, democracy, and justice for all the citizens of Israel.
Thank you so much, Laura. Those are the opening statements from all the candidates. Again, we thank Telfed for bringing together all these candidates for tonight. And now we're going to get to a series of just 4 very, very straightforward questions. We took questions from the English-speaking community in Israel. So by the way, when you hear the questions, you'll start getting a sense for what's on people's minds. I'm going to ask all the candidates and all the representatives to be very, very precise in their answers, because we're giving just 60 seconds. It's 1 minute to just give the highlights. Obviously, you can't get to details of your plans, but certainly it will give the people who are watching an opportunity to hear, do the parties actually have plans for the various issues? So we're going to go 60 seconds. I might here or there ask a follow-up question, but hopefully you'll cover everything and we won't have to do that. Question number 1 is, what is your party's plan to bring down the cost of living in Israel? Very specific. What is your party's plan to bring down the cost of living? We're going to start with the blue and white party for this round. Member of Knesset Ruth Wallace-Malandi, what is your party's plan to bring down the cost of living? 60 seconds.
So my party has an economic outlook on, especially at the corona pandemic, terrible situation right now. That's why we had things reopening cautiously because of the scare to the public health. But nonetheless, the economy needed to be opened with precautions. Also, sustainable sources of income are being looked at, particularly in tourism, even though it's very strange to say that, but newly thought of sustainable sources of income that have to do with local governments in different areas in Israel in order to create new jobs, to create a diversification of job opportunities in the periphery, in the south, in the north, incentivizing by the Ministry of Finance, high-tech companies to come into industrial zones in faraway places where women, and especially minority-related women, Arab women, have no job opportunities close to home. These are the things. These are the number of things that we are looking at to make the economy better and to lower the cost of living in the medium term. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll turn to the Amina party. Jeremy Sultan, what is your party's plan to bring down the cost of living in Israel? About 1 minute.
Our plan to lower the cost of living is to start by putting more money in your pockets. When we're going to be done with the corona situation, we're going to have over 400,000 jobs that are just not going to be replaced. That's the reality of what we've just gone through. Again, the colossal failure of the last 10 months of this government. We're going to be able to replace those jobs through the private sector. How are we going to do that? We're going to lower the corporate tax from 23% to 15%. On average, we're going to lower everyone's income tax to between 15 to 20%. We also have a plan in terms of being able to allow people to buy a house. I don't know about the rest of the panelists. I don't own my own house. I would like to. In order for me to do that, we need to go ahead and move forward on the Amina plan to be able to go ahead and change the way that the housing is here in Israel. I can tell you as a member of the Planning and Building Regional Committee of Harel that the situation we're dealing with now is just not going to allow anyone to be able to buy a house anytime soon. So again, we're talking about lowering taxes, we're talking about an affordable house plan, and we're talking about putting more money into the pocket of every Israeli citizen so that we can go ahead and turn everything around and make this country a place to live in again.
Thank you, Jeremy. We'll turn to the Yesh Atid party.
In my opinion, it's more important than lowering the cost of living in Israel. First of all, let's make sure that there'll be a minimal number of unemployed Israelis. And I think this is the first priority that we have to care. What it means practically is the state should be much more involved in the way the economy is being handled. We cannot leave it to so-called free market. We can see the outcome of the so-called policy of the best finance minister ever by the state of Israel, as Netanyahu presented himself recently. We know the number of unemployed Israelis is rising. And second priority will be to look at the unprivileged groups in the Israeli society, those who are currently under poverty line, starting with the senior citizens, including Holocaust survivors that are suffering so much, especially now, and children. 30% of the children in Israel are under poverty line. So let's make sure that the country can help them all. Lowering the cost of living will come, but later on.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the Likud party, former member Knesset Yehuda Glick. What is your party's plan to bring down the cost of living in Israel? 1 minute.
Well, Likud is lucky to be led by Israel's best finance minister ever, the one who cured Israel's economy and brought the jobs even when the whole world was going through a crisis. Yes, we went through a terrible crisis in the past year, but we will as soon as we can get out of the COVID, thanks to the vaccinations, which we are seeing here. We hope to be the first one out of it. We will go back to the new market, to free market, to gas drilling, to peace in the region, all the things that we did to raise the economy and to open new markets to Israel. In my remaining 10 seconds, I want to say shalom to Jeremy, who I'd forgotten the last time. I mentioned all the other names. My good friend Jeremy, I love you.
Always count on Yehuda for the love and achduta and whatever panel we're on. Thank you. I'll use the extra 5 seconds that you had for that comment. Moving on to Meretz.
We should leave them alone.
Laura Warden, what is your party's plan to bring down the cost of living in Israel? 1 minute.
Okay, well, a few things. First of all, we should be investing and improving the education system. Most children in Israel did not study for the past year. Our government and this country is leading in the lowest number of hours studied by children in the world. In the Western world or places that keep such statistics, certainly in the OECD. We should be investing more in job training. There was no investment in job training, but it was not budgeted for also the 6 months before Corona started. And we're going to need to help people get more jobs that will allow them to close the gap between what they earn and what they spend. We also believe in investing in public transportation in general, improving the transportation so that people living in the periphery will be closer in and won't be left paying the high cost of transporting things to where they live, or in going long distance, spending huge amounts of money on the transportation to get where there is. We also would be addressing the tax issues and making them more fair, that is adding on steps to the tax system that there now is, cutting down on the indirect taxes, on the VAT tax, which is incredibly high in Israel.
10 seconds.
Changing the direct taxes, raising them, adding the step, because they are the lowest amongst the lowest in the OECD.
Thank you so much, Laura. We'll move on to the Religious Zionist Party. Simcha Rotman, what is your party's plan to bring down the cost of living in Israel? 1 minute.
Okay, so it was Ronald Reagan who said that the most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So I'll try not to terrify anyone listening to us. And after a year that the government, most of the time for good reasons, some of the time for bad reasons, or for problematic reasons, prevented the small businesses from improving and lowering our costs. That's the best way to lower the cost. We're trying to bring down all the obstacles that the government put: deregulation, one-stop shop approvals, opening business, making the doing business index for Israel a better rate better, and Of course, the first rule is first do no harm. Try to put, and exactly like our best finance minister in history did in 2003, put higher taxes, a special high tax on high salaries inside the government, because during the COVID, the small businesses paid all the prices and the public sector did not.
10 seconds.
Done in 2003, we need to do it also now.
Thank you very much. Finally, for this round, from the New Hope Party, former member of Knesset Sharon Haskel, what is your party's plan to bring down the cost of living in Israel? Sharon, just unmute yourself.
Hi, okay. So it's very difficult to explain how to reduce the cost of living in 60 seconds. And we have a whole plan on it on our website, the entire platform, and it's actually translated to English as well. You just press on the American flag and you can see the entire plan. Some parts of it speaks basically about reducing bureaucracy and regulations in Israel. The difference between the actual price of the product and the price that we pay in the shop is huge. And the reason for that is immense amount of regulation and bureaucracy. So we are going to open more importations of products here in Israel, and we're going to ease up the regulation on importation through a reform in Machon HaTkanim. We will also change a very ancient and old regulation that is forced on farmers here in Israel, a new modern European kind of regulations in anything to do with farming, so that we can reduce the prices of the food that are produced here in Israel, including reducing many taxes that farmers are paying for really no reason at all. That will reduce the prices of the product. More so, we are actually going to create a one-stop shop for small businesses to reduce the amount of time that they're spending on bureaucracy here in Israel and give them more time to deal in achieving a better business for them. Just last thing, we will also create a one-stop shop for a housing, because there is so much regulations and authorities that is mixed in between different ministries in Israel that it creates a lot of barriers in order to create a bigger amount of housing, of houses, apartments here in Israel. So there's an entire plan, and you're more than welcome to look on our platform and on our website to see the entire plan.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Now, I recognize that asking about reducing the cost of living is very difficult to do in 1 minute's time. The next round, though, the next question, I really do believe is something which every one of you can give, certainly the bullet points of your party's plans. And I want to tell you, not just the questions we received from Telfed, but I've been bombarded with this question over the last number of months. And the question is about changing the electoral system in Israel. This is something which especially English-speaking Olim who have come from democracies all around the world and feel that there's a certain dysfunctionality that's going on in Israel, certainly by the fact that we're having our 4th election in 2 years. And the question that we're going to ask each candidate again is, A, does your party have a plan to change the electoral system? It's possible the answer is no. And if you do have a plan, what are the bullet points of those plans, without getting into the nitty-gritty details? But we're going to do 1 minute kind of rapid fire going around for each one of you. We will start with the Religious Zionist Party and ask Simcha Rotman, does your party have a plan to change the electoral system, and what are the bullet points of that plan? 1 minute.
Okay, so I will say very shortly, we have plans that it's not on the published platform because it takes more than 100 days, and our plan is for the first 100 days, the written plan. But we have plans. But in order to change the system, you have to understand what are the issues that created this problem. The main issue is the high threshold. When the Knesset made this threshold higher, I sat there as an NGO representative of Meshilut, the organization that I founded, and I told the Knesset members from the Likud and Israel Beiteinu exactly that. If you will do that, we won't have stability, we won't be able to form a government, and voila, that's what happened. So we need to lower the threshold, but of course, any change in the electoral system has to come from all parties, or definitely 80 Knesset members, 70, not because the legitimacy, otherwise it will not work. So we hope we will be able to push forward, bringing the threshold back to where it was and even lower. Another plan.
Just 10 seconds.
Okay, for the longer future, maybe after the 100 days of our first plan, we'll go to the 101st day.
Okay, so basically the bottom line sounded like lowering the election threshold. I have to hit myself for forgiveness. I voted to increase the threshold in 2014, but we can talk about that a different time. Let's move on to the Labor Party in terms of any plans for electoral reform. Former member Knesset Nachman Shai, does the Labor Party have a plan to change the electoral system, and what would that plan be? Bullet points.
We currently have no plan to change the electoral system, although we understand and recognize the weaknesses of the present system, and all of us who serve in the Knesset can serve as witnesses for those difficulties to govern, but I don't see it happening. And I tell you why. Those parties that are missing on this panel are the ones that will block any change in the electoral system. And just look around and see what I mean. So it's nice to raise new ideas, and I believe we have to look at those issues and to find a better system, but it all should be based on democratic values and democratic principles. I'd like to remind all my colleagues here that only two parties carry full primaries to elect the representatives for the Knesset, and Meretz has a similar system, but not exactly. So we would like to see any change that will be based on the idea that Israel is a democratic state, and parties should also be handled and conducted according to a democratic principle. And I think that should be held by the representative here that are coming from parties that they themselves were not elected the way it is now democratically. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go to the Meretz Party now. Laura Wharton, does the Meretz Party have a plan for changing the electoral system? And if it does, what is that plan? You have about 1 minute.
Okay, well, first of all, about the threshold, it's a little bit high, but I think basically the idea of raising it from what it was when there were one party representatives, I think is a good thing. The thing that I think, there are two things that are important to us, I think, to change. One is a regional representation. The way things now work is that a huge number of the members of Knesset are from, Tel Aviv or the big cities. And we think it's very important that cities in the north and the south, in the periphery would have representation. So what we could do is do what Ben Gurion, I think, suggested, which was divide the Knesset and have representatives that are from all the country, that are chosen by all the country, and then have individual representatives from particular areas, and then we'll distribute. I would also say, though, we do believe that every party should have some form of internal democracy. And as Nachman said, there are a few parties that have no internal democracy whatsoever. We think it must be done, and that would also ensure and guarantee that there would be representatives, women representatives in all the parties, which should be a condition for the approval of a party list, I think.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to New Hope, former member Knesset Sharon Haskel. Does your party have a plan to change the electoral system, and what is that plan? And please unmute yourself.
Yes, we do have a plan. It's also published. Two major points in that plan are in concern of the amount of time that a prime minister can serve in the office. One of the first legislation that we will pass is to limit that time to 8 years, so 2 terms, but a maximum amount of 8 years for a prime minister. I think that within 8 years, someone that didn't do what he meant to do will not probably, continue and do it later on. The other issue, the cap on the amount of time to serve also is not just for the prime minister, but it's also for mayors and local council as well. What we see in Israel as sometimes 40 years term of one mayor. There's a lot of allegations for corruptions in terms, such long terms like that. So it's not just for the prime minister, but also for local councils and mayors. The other one is also to involve a direct election system that will be on top of the party system, so the parliamentary system that we have today. So a certain percentage of representatives will be voted into the Knesset as it is today through parties, but another percentage will be through direct elections through areas around the country.
Okay, thank you very much, Sharon. We'll turn to Yesh Atid, member of Knesset Moshe Torpaz. Does your party have a plan to change the electoral system, and what are the bullet points of that plan?
Yeah, so like Sharon, I'll start with limiting the period of Prime Minister to 8 years for 2 cadences, no more. We will shrink the government from 36 or some kind of, tremendous number to 18, only 18 sarim, no more. And we'll start on writing a chukah, for Israel, because we think we need to work on that, but we have to form it. And here I very rarely agree with Simcha Rotman, but here I agree, we have to have, we think, 80 MKs that will, sign this and will be able to change, because we think we can't work on such a small minority of 61. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for also keeping to the time again. Blue and White Party, is Ruth available with us? If not, well, okay, you are, okay. Member of Knesset Ruth Wasserman-Landi, does your party have a plan to change the electoral system? And what is it, the bullet points for 1 minute?
So certainly we have a plan. The two tenures is something that we've been saying from the beginning. Once we have a little bit of a more stable government, this is something we certainly want to do. And another thing that we completely agree on is the whole difficulty of the coalition system is that very obviously is making our political arena very unstable. And we need to think and brainstorm about a mechanism via which we can not have elections again and again and again. And this will take some doing to change inherently the electoral system in Israel.
Okay, thank you so much. Also, for everyone keeping to the time, that's wonderful. Likud, former member Yehuda Glick, does your party have a plan to change the electoral system? And if it does, what are the bullet points of that plan? 1 minute.
Well, of course, we would love to pass a legislation that only the Likud should be the prime minister, but that we will wait for that one for some other time. But I definitely think that those who said that they only want a 2-term government, and they're talking about they don't want Netanyahu. But I do think that anything that should be agreed upon should have a wider agreement. And therefore, the best thing, before we change the electoral system, is that we should know how to run a dialogue here with respect to each other. One thing that I believe that can make a major change and stop elections is that if we have passed a very simple legislation that the biggest party, their representative for a prime minister should be the prime minister, and that will definitely immediately prevent elections and elections. I can just say it in terms of representation that Laura mentioned, Likud has inside it in a democratic system representation from all over the country, and that's something that at least at this point, if we don't have representation, local representation, we have it in the party.
Okay, thank you, Yehuda. And finally, for this round, Jeremy Sultan from Amina party. Does Amina have a plan to change the electoral system, and what are the bullet points of that plan?
Five bullet points on this. Number 1, prime minister term limits to either 8 years or 3 terms. Because unlike the Yesh Atid plan, we know, and Joe, if you remember this, Knesset terms don't usually end up being 4 years. Second one is the idea of the French law. We're not talking about it being retroactive, but we do think it's an issue that every single prime minister over the last 25 years has spent time in office being investigated and dealing with legal troubles. So we think moving forward, not with Netanyahu, but after Netanyahu, in terms of having the French law that investigations on prime ministers, that we should see the trial happen after their term in office. The third point is in terms of ministers, we want to lower ministers down to 22, 23. This is part of the Singapore plan to cut fat. The fourth point is lowering the amount of ministries. We have more ministries than ministers. One of the things people like to do is have less ministers, but then give people 2 to 3 ministries. There are close to 40 government ministries. We want to lower that, again, closer to the 22, 23. And the fifth thing, in terms of representation, so what we are able to do in our system is make sure that our list has representatives for the Anglo community, for the French community, for the Russian community. We have a representative for the people with disabilities. We have people from the north, from the south. That's something we can do within our system. As Nachman Shai, my friend, said, it's very difficult to expect to say the type of changes some of the other people suggested is actually possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Certainly a lot to think about in terms of a question which is very much on people's minds, and we're happy to hear the discussion. And even those who said that we don't have a specific plan, we're very open and honest about why that is and what could actually happen in the Knesset. There was a lot of questioning about the issue of right wing, center, left wing, a lot of confusion out there. There's a lot of terminologies that float out there in campaigns. So I'm going to sort of take all the questions that were asked and ask it in one very specific question, and we'll go through each one of you again with about 1 minute to give your answer. And the question is your party right wing, center, or left wing? And how does that play out in policy? Again, how do you define yourself? Right, center, or left? But let's not just have terminology. What does that actually mean in practice in terms of the party's policies? We'll start with Yesh Atid, with Member Knesset Moshe Torpaz. Are you right wing, center, left wing? And what does it mean in policy? You have about 1 minute.
So thank you. Yesh Atid is a center party, and I'm proud of that because I'm a settler. I come from Kfar Etzion, the first settlement in Judah and Samaria, and I have left-wing or center-left-wing people in our party, as we see ourselves as the center way of the Rambam, derech ha'emtza of the Rambam. And that means we can find ourselves with people that agree on 90% of issues, and yet you can have people from right and left joining in because this is a center party. And that's the way we see politics today. Thank you.
Okay, so center basically in terms of the people that are in the party and people coming together.
And dealing with Palestinian issues, dealing with all the Israeli issues, this is a very extreme centered party. And I deeply believe in that. And that's where I met Yair Lapid when he came to on the opening of a new shchuna in Kfar Etzion. So this is how center works. And I deeply believe in it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Moshe. If I can ask all the panelists who are not speaking to mute just to make sure that we can hear everyone who's speaking properly. We're going to go on to the New Hope Party, and we're going to ask former member of Knesset Sharon Haskel, is your party right wing, center, or left wing? And what does that mean in terms of actual policy? And just unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Dov. So yes, we are a right-wing liberal party. It means that we believe in individual liberties and economic freedom. It means we from an economic point of view, we believe in a free market, but on anything and on all the issues of civilian, we believe in individual freedom. On issues of security and foreign affairs, we also sit on the right side of the map.
Okay, thank you. That was pretty clear in terms of where you are. Let's go to the name of the party sort of gives it away, but we'll go to the Amina party with Jeremy Sultan. Is your party right wing, center, or left wing? And very specifically, what does that mean in terms of policy?
Yeah, so as you said, we're Yamina, we're rightward, we're definitely a right party. What does that mean? We're right wing when it comes to economics. Bennett's Singapore plan, we're talking about Reagan, Thatcher type economics. In terms of national security diplomacy, we're against a Palestinian state. All of the usual aspects in terms of what you would expect. We want to have judicial reform. I think a majority of people know who Naftali Bennett is. They know his leadership. They know Ayelet Shaked, a lot of people on our list. I think that question was not necessarily meant for us. Our name sort of gives it away.
Okay, thank you. That was very clear. Let's go to the Blue and White Party and to Member President Ruth Ross Melende. Is your party right, center, or left? What does that mean in terms of policy?
So very clearly, our party is center. I think that socioeconomic issues are center right a little bit, although we do have elements that tend to go towards more favorable disposition towards welfare issues, given the current very difficult situation, on security issues, the Palestinian state and so on. Very liberal on the one hand, but very security oriented. The head of the party is the former chief of staff, extremely experienced in security oriented affairs. And that is the stance, very, very firm, yet liberal and open-minded in terms of where we look and how we look at the Arab world around us and opportunities versus challenges vis-a-vis the Palestinians and the Arab world in general.
Thank you very much. Likud Party, former member Knesset Yehuda Glick, is your party right, center, or left? How does that play out in policy?
First of all, I must say I heard Sharon Haskell speaking, and I really miss you in the Likud. I think you presented pretty much what we believe in: a liberal right. We're responsible right, taking into consideration that in spite of your ideology, you can't really always do whatever's on your heart desire. But I want to, make this panel a little more interesting, because everybody claims we're center. I heard my dear friend Moshe Kinley, we're center. Well, I want to remind you that the reason that this government is going to elections again, because a year ago, when we wanted to develop a unity government, which is center, you turned down because you placed yourself as left. So you can't come out and say we are center, but only when it comes to tachlis, you run away and you cause this government to be a very weak government. Just wanted to wake people up a little bit.
And by the way, in just a few minutes, we're going to get to candidates asking each other questions and some conversations. So thank you, Yehuda, for warming us up and getting us into that place. And I'm sure that Moshe is going to want the chance to respond as well. We'll go to the Meretz Party. City Councilwoman Laura Wharton, is your party right, center, or left? And how does that play out in policy?
Okay, two things. First of all, we're a party, which is not to be taken for granted, because a lot of the people here are representing kind of list of people that were thrown together, and some of the representatives have served in many different parties already in a short time. We are left in the sense that we believe in social democracy for the economy. I mentioned a bunch of things that we believe in government responsibility for education, looking after the poor, for housing, investing more in housing, and all the social services one expects in a modern democratic, social democratic country. We're also left in the sense that we think that we should have a strong Israel with clear borders and not have kind of a messianic outlook over spreading out over all the territories that we ever conquered. We're Zionist. We have a former deputy chief of staff, and we had a former chief of staff of the army who supported us in the last elections. So we want a strong Israel, but we think the best way to make it strong and safe is to, among other things, try to seek peace. And most of the peace treaties that were supposedly signed recently were actually pioneered under Barak's government. The representatives from the United Arab Emirates, from Morocco, all came to Rabin's funeral after he had contacts with them and were with our then Minister of
Industry.
It doesn't matter, of industry, Ran Cohen. He knows all the representatives from the United Arab Emirates and so forth that are now visiting and that supposedly we're inventing a peace with. They've actually been at peace with us for some time. And that's thanks to this very practical, realpolitik of looking for partners in the region, which we think we should be doing all the time.
Okay. Former member of Knesset Nachman Shai from the Labor Party. Is Labor Party right wing, center, or left wing? And how does that play out in policy?
Well, I refuse to get this division, and I insist on central left, where I open my remarks this evening. That's where we have been, and that's where we stay. And I also refuse to accept those political powers trying to push us to the extreme left. I think, as I said before, I respect very much Meretz, and I hope they will be able to carry on their ideas in the new political map. We are continuing the Rabin legacy. And I don't know if everyone is aware of it, which means that on the one hand, we carry the flag of security, as a first priority to any political agreement in the future between us and the Palestinians. We are looking forward to two-nation state for two people, and there's no any idea, any change in our traditional policy. As I said before, security comes first. Jerusalem will remain undivided. There's no doubt about it, no division of Jerusalem whatsoever. When it comes to social and economic ideas, we have to pay attention to the growing unacceptable gaps between rich and poor in Israel. That was also all done under the government of Likud. More rich people and many more poor people, especially now poverty within the senior citizens in Israel. We are going to take care of it. We have to pay attention to their needs and to make sure that Israel will be much more equal state in contrast to what has been done under the Likud government for so many years. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the last one for this round from the Religious Zionist Party, Simcha Rotman, is your party right-wing, center, or left? And how does it play out in policy?
Okay, so no problem with that. 100% right-wing. It's even our slogan, 100% right-wing government. What does it mean in policy? Of course, the religious Zionist idea is nation, Am Israel, Eretz Israel, Torat Israel, the nation, the Israeli nation, the Israeli land, and the Israeli Torah, and the Jewish land. And the state of Israel has to remain the Jewish state. It means that the land of Israel, on issues of where we stand on the land of Israel, of course, we want Israel to exercise its sovereignty on the Negev, on the Galil, and of course, Judea and Samaria. This is in our platform. When we are talking about the nation, we have basically the only party that have a strong plan of how to keep Israel for the Jewish people, how to focus the Aliyah efforts to Jews that wants to come to Israel and to join the Jewish state. And of course, on the identity of the state as part of the Torat Israel, to have the public sphere of Israel be an example of how a Jewish state should look like. On all those issues, we are right-wing, and we say it very proudly, and we are the only parties that is committed to 100% right-wing government.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very clear. Growing up in the United States, we used to go to baseball games and keep score in the program. So just to make it as simple as possible for those who are watching, just from what we heard right now, basically divides up into the right wing, New Hope, Amina, Likud, Religious Zionists, with all different elements of emphasis, but just in terms of how they categorize themselves. Straight center was Yesh Atid, blue and white. Center left, Labor Party, and left was the Meretz Party. It kind of helps everyone just in terms of figuring out where they stand. Now we get to the exciting part, because we're going to allow the candidates to talk to each other. We've certainly had a civil opportunity tonight to get to hear from one another, and we'll continue it that way in this part of the panel. We really want to give each candidate an opportunity to ask one very specific targeted question to one other very specific candidate. So obviously use this in terms of your ability to differentiate perhaps, or whatever it is that you want to use it for. We do ask that it not be a speech, short question. And then the candidate has approximately a minute or so to answer, and we'll see how it goes in terms of the dialogue continuing. So we're going to start this round by giving the opportunity to the blue and white party, to member of Knesset Ruth Malandi, to ask a question to one candidate, a very specific question, and approximately 1 minute answer as we start the dialogue. The floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity. I was very, very impressed by the presentation made by Jeremy. I didn't know you before, so it's very good to meet you. And I'd very much appreciate understanding something that you don't often speak about. In fact, I'm not sure that I've heard the party speak about ever, and that is a tremendously and unbelievable rise in crime and violence in the Arab street in the past 10 years. In fact, we're talking about almost a country within a country, murders taking place almost on a weekly basis. 23, if not 24 already, people have been murdered since the beginning of the year on Israel's streets. It almost seems as if there's no law and order. The south of Israel with the Bedouins has become almost a no man's land. Obviously, police is not the only answer. How do you see policy in terms of taking care of this problem that is, it has no borders, it has no real geography. It is something that is really endangering society in general, and of course the Arab society in particular.
Jeremy, try to keep it to about one answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks for the question, Ruth. I don't know if you remember this. We did a panel back on I-24 News a few months ago, but I think your question is a very important question. And I'll tell you, as someone who, again, I was saying before, I sit on in a regional planning and building housing committee, and under my jurisdiction is also the city of Abu Ghosh. And I'll tell you, a lot of the stuff that I have to make decisions on, I have to vote on, are really stuff that belong in a court of law, not in a housing and planning and zoning committee. And I can tell you from my work with Jabir, Salim Jabir, the mayor there, and some of my friends there on city council, this is something that doesn't just affect their villages, it affects everyone around all the cities and all of the neighborhoods that live around it. And I agree with you that needs an issue that needs to have good answers. Specifically when it comes to the South and what we're seeing there with the Bedouins, we did put out a plan, and you can go to naftalibennett.co.il to get information exactly on that. But as the situation as a whole, really the best way that we can do is to have the type of relationships that I have with local leadership, because there's a reason why, and we see this throughout the Arab population, why there's a higher turnout in local elections than in national elections, because those are their actual leaders. Those are the people they speak to. In many cases, they're also a lot more moderate than the joint list leaders that we're accustomed to seeing on TV in the joint list. And unfortunately, without having the cooperation and dialogue with their leaders, I don't think we're going to be able to find a lot of ways to coercively change a lot of that throughout the country. But when you have things that go completely out of control in a specific area, such as the Bedouin area in the South, for sure, police, enforcement is a big one, but also being able to change the rules of engagement if necessary. And I would say that it is necessary in that area. And there are a few other things that are components within our plan. Again, you can go and find that out. But I agree with you. We didn't talk about this in this panel, but that is one of the underlying issues that all of us are dealing with, whether we realize that or not. So thanks for the question.
Okay, absolutely. And if we can keep the questions to shorter and the answers shorter, we can even have a little bit of a back and forth as well, given the time that we have. Let's turn to the Religious Zionist Party. Simcha Rotman, you have an opportunity to ask another candidate a question and perhaps engage in a quick dialogue. And again, I ask that the question be as short as possible and give a chance for some back and forth. The floor is yours.
Okay, I have a question for Jeremy also. And we love to hear him speak. So we all focus the question to Jeremy, so we will get to hear as much as we can from him. I always like this. So the question is, I hear a lot of the things you offer to do. You said you have a plan at the party to deal with the justice system and these infiltrators, and a lot of, and to most of it, I will agree and I will sign on. How can you do it when you consistently say that you will form a government with Yesh Atid, with the Avodah, that, as we know, object to all the plans that you are trying to make? And how this kind of coalition that you are trying to form will work?
Thanks for the question, Simcha. As you know, I'm a big fan. I have your book. I think everyone should read it. I know I shouldn't be endorsing other, parties, but I think you have a great book, and people should read up on that in terms of judicial reform. I'll tell you that the government that we want to be able to form is one that's going to focus with the major things that that Israelis care about. And that's, as I said beforehand, the financial situation and Corona from a health perspective. All this stuff I'm saying, and the question also that I answered before from Ruth, all this stuff is very important. We need to be able to do that. But we also have to remember what is on the list of priorities the most important thing. Now, I would love to have a coalition where you guys are also a part of it. It would be great to sit in the coalition together, Simcha. But you guys decided that you're endorsing Netanyahu for prime minister, and of course that's your decision to do so. But we would like to have as much of a right-wing government as possible. Over 80 seats in every single poll, and sometimes close to 90 seats, are within the right-wing bloc. We know a majority of the parties here on this panel are part of the right wing. We believe that we can form a government which is, for the most part, on the right. But we also have to be straight. And look, you're part of this opposition too, Simcha. You know, you guys are in the BB bloc, but you're part of the opposition. You're not in the coalition. We're in a situation where we had a 10-month colossal failure of this government, and it's not working for the Israeli people. They do not care about the Israeli people, and we need to replace them so that we can get the economy back, so that people can go back to living their normal lives. And look, the fact that we're having this on Zoom as opposed to having it in person just shows you the fact that despite what Netanyahu said on Fox News, we're not over Corona yet. We're still dealing with it from a health perspective as well. So yeah, I want to go ahead and Simcha, I want to implement all those plans, but if I have to choose between judicial reform and creating 400,000 new jobs so that Israelis are able to make ends meet, I am for sure going to choose 400,000 new jobs. And that doesn't mean that I don't believe in your book or in judicial reform, but it means in the sense of priorities, we need to make sure that people can live to see the next day first. That's just.
I'll give you a chance. I'll give you a chance to respond.
So if I understood correctly, and if you're trying to get, I don't understand so much how adding the Labour Party to the coalition will help you bring jobs. The ideology, even on economy, is so different, but doesn't matter. I think the main issue that you mentioned is the government is colossal failure, and I want to change the prime minister. So to pay those prices, you're willing to throw away the reforming the judicial system, the reform, the sovereignty issue, getting the new settlements in place. What are you willing to give? Where will you stop in your quest to get Netanyahu out of the prime minister house?
Jeremy, 30 seconds.
The quest is not about who is sitting in the prime minister's residence. The quest is being able to allow the Israeli people to live again. We have had the worst year probably that a majority of every Israeli has felt in a generation. And what we want to do is change that. And that doesn't mean I've changed one position or Bennett has changed one position. We're the same people, we have the same values. But making sure we give Israeli citizens their lives back, that is my priority. And that will be the number one thing we do. And then we can go back to having 4 elections on the usual right-left divide and not figure anything out. But first, we need to put the Israeli people first, because that's what they expect from us.
Okay, thank you for the back and forth. That was certainly a fascinating exchange, and certainly seeing two parties that are clearly contesting one another on specific points, and it's good for people to be able to hear that dialogue. Let's go to the Labour Party candidate and former member Kassim Nachman Shai with the opportunity to ask a question to another candidate. And I'd love to keep it brief back and forth so we can actually have a little bit of that dialogue that we just had. Please.
Well, I thank you very much. I'm glad to hear so many different opinions here. But Ruth, I'd like to ask you a question. There's no doubt that Blue and White totally failed. The idea was to change the prime minister. That's all. There was no ideology whatsoever. No one expected you to be together. And you see that when you fail to all corners of the Israeli politics. You can find representatives of Blue and White all over the political spectrum. Okay, that's it. So a huge number of Israelis, unprecedented, supported Blue and White to bring the government down and to bring prime minister down. That's it. That's all. And you did not accomplish that dream. Nothing. You actually gave Netanyahu more time in power. And now when you leave, he's actually as powerful as he was half a year ago, or 1 year ago. Why are you still continuing to run? What are you trying to achieve now? Where are you going? I think you should just admit, not you personally, you're a good friend of mine, but in general, that you failed and leave the political arena and give new powers to take over. I mean, your voters, I don't know why they still vote for you, but I'm sure there are you're a bunch of great and very talented people, and I like you very much, you personally, but at the same time, you're left with nothing. So where are you going? What are you trying to achieve now?
Nachman, I respect you no less than you have mentioned your respect for me, and thank you for saying that. Very clearly, not everybody thinks that we have completely failed, because the polls show that we have 5 to 6 mandates. There is, however, a huge, allow me, please. There is, however, a huge decrease in public support for the Blue and White Party. This is no secret, everybody knows that. And that is the huge political price paid by the head of the party for going into the government. So very clearly, unless you think he is a total idiot, pardon me for being frank, and you don't think so because he isn't, very clearly, the incentive for going into the government was not the seat and not the popularity, because he has lost, and he knew he would. It was clear. He promised the public he would not go and sit with Netanyahu, and he did it. He clearly disappointed a lot of people. So the motivation was something other than popularity or political gain. It was the most unpolitical step one could possibly imagine. Meaning that what he did was, whether you agree with it or not, was almost, what's the word when you give up yourself and you do something for the benefit? It was almost altruistic, okay? Whether you agree with it or not is a completely different story. But I'm in the Knesset for the first time, Nachman, really a month, which is nothing. But because we have no soldiers, so to speak, I'm in a lot of committees. And even though there are very few parliamentary tools, for example, we cannot legislate or initiate legislation because we are in between governments, there are still emergency committees all the time. And you know me 1 or 2 days, you know my education, you know my background. I've been to some places, I've studied some, and I care very deeply for this country. I'm looking at these committees, sitting in them, smelling them, touching them, feeling them. And I'm saying that if we were not there, God help. I mean, that's how I feel. That is how I feel. The checks and balances that we provide, both for making sure that there was no, what's the word of sipuach? The fact, yes, exactly. The fact that we have really stopped the Likud government, and I'm not saying all the steps by the Likud government are bad, by the way, but there were some initiatives that were horrible in terms of democratic liberal thought, and we, with our bodies, more or less, stop them. And I feel it, see it, sense it, smell it. I live this 9 committees, and I'm thinking that if we don't pass the threshold, which we will, according to the polls right now, but if we don't, what will happen in April is that because of the lack of legitimacy and the lack of popularity, there will be an absolute void of that checks and balances. And what will happen very clearly is that in the transfer government that will take place in April, in other words, the prime minister will still be the same prime minister, very unilateral steps with no checks and balances will continue. And this is not a good thing for the state of Israel, for the Jewish peoplehood, and for what I see as the sanctuary of the general Jewish people worldwide. This is critical and it's key, and it's one of the most unpopular political things to do.
Okay, thank you so much. That's it. But that was, I think both of you were very clear and spoke very extensively in terms of where you are on that specific
But
issue.
I love Nachman, so please, this is very important for me to make sure.
None of it is mutual. None of it's personal. Let's go to Yesh Atid and member of Knesset Moshe Torpaz and give you the opportunity to ask a question to another candidate. And again, if it's short, there can be some back and forth between you.
Okay, so good evening. And I'd like to ask Yehuda Glick, who learned a few years above me in Har Etzion Yeshiva. And Yuda, we learned at Rav Amitar's Bet Midrash, and we learned Vavdem et Hager and Bakesh Shalom Verodfeu. Now I look at you and I see you as a straight, honest, honorable, law-abiding person, and you're sitting with a prime minister who has 3 bills of indictments, and he's running this last year Corona crisis very badly because of his law issues. And I can't see how a person who grew up in the same Beit Midrash like me still says that he's the best prime minister for this government. I mean, there are so many parties here, and almost all of them, except for you, feel that Netanyahu has to go home. So I'm trying to understand your point of view as a Likud member, as an honest yeshiva bocher. How can you still hold that idea?
Thank you, Moshe. Kinley, Moshe, my dear friend Moshe, thank you so much for your question. And first of all, I want to start with saying that you're talking to somebody personally who was indicted with sentenced for beating up a woman, and the police had asked to put me in jail for 10 months, and eventually it turned out that 2 police officers lied, and I was totally clean after the decision. So an indictment is not a sentence, and the press is not the one who can sentence the prime minister. Do I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is complete? No. When I see him, I see the person is devoting his life for the people of Israel. Making mistakes, okay, he's making mistakes. But when I compare that, after the Supreme Court gave him the right to run the country, and I see what he's doing when leading the economy, bringing the vaccinations, and making peace, these are the things that I expect of a prime minister. You know, the prime minister is not Rabbi Amital. The prime minister is not, he's supposed to be a leader. He's supposed to be a person who knows how to run the country. And I think decently, he is definitely not a Satan. And I frankly believe that sometimes there's like a religion, an anti-Bibi religion, that the situation is utter darkness because of Netanyahu. If we only move him, and I say again to you, Moshe, why a year ago, when Netanyahu offered to the Yesh Atid, together with Kachol Lavan, did Lapid break away so that they would not be able to be part of the responsibility?
Because he didn't believe one word Netanyahu said, and Netanyahu proved Lapid was right. I mean, we don't have a yearly budget in Israel for 3 years. And you know, because you were a parliament member, that not having a budget for a country means people are dying because we can't fulfill our responsibility. And this is only because we stopped believing Netanyahu.
Had you been part of the government, you see what we're saying right now are the consequences of your decision not to be in the government. For 2 years, you're fighting again and again because you don't want Netanyahu. And what are the consequences? 2 years that there's not been a stable government.
You had Amina with you, you kicked him out. You had Gideon Sar, he left. Look, you're not left with anybody. I mean, except for the Haredi parties and for Simcha Rotman, you don't have anyone because you lost all your allies, and that's very hard. I used to vote Likud a few years ago. I stopped because I understood I can't believe in Netanyahu. You yourself, you're kicked out. I mean, look where you are in the party, because Netanyahu doesn't want honest, strong people next to him. That's the truth.
I think that
can we repeat the part about Simcha Rotman, please?
Moshe, one little thing I want to say.
Yehuda, just 10 seconds to wrap it up.
10 seconds. You and I know that Bennett was not in the government, even though Amina can say they want a small government of 22, because they wanted 4 seats for 8 members of Knesset. So yes,
that's not true. That's not true.
You cannot fill the appetite of everybody in politics. That's the way it is. And Netanyahu has been running the world, and apparently the world leaders do evaluate him very much.
I want to give Simcha 15 seconds because you were brought into it. Did you want to say something?
I was brought in. I would like to give Kinley the ability to say it again, that we are the only party with ideology, clear ideology.
Yeah, Kahanistic ideology, Simcha, but yes.
Okay.
Racist,
please hear him out.
Racist is also ideology, yes.
He
We're going to
spoke
bring it back.
beautifully before. No need for anything else.
Okay, we're going to bring it back. We're going to go to New Hope and give Sharon Haskell the opportunity to ask another candidate a question. And by the way, if you do see something that's said that you want to join in, you can certainly let it be known, and we'll give you that opportunity as well. But Sharon, the floor is yours to ask a brief question. Let's get some brief answers and some dialogue.
Thank you. No, I did think of maybe replying to some things that Simcha and Jeremy said. I want to ask a question, Yehuda Glick, but I'm sure that Simcha and Jeremy might want to answer that as well, as they are the one who are meant to be assisting Bibi in building a 61-62 coalition.
We'll give each of them a chance to respond as well, but go ahead, ask your question, please.
So Yehuda, I really respect you, and I respect the person you are, and you are a true ideological person, someone honest that you can trust. But you come here and you cover up for Netanyahu after he lied about sovereignty. So you speak, oh yeah, Netanyahu is going to do sovereignty. He promised that on the 1st of July. He lied to everybody, including to us. He lied about the promises about the judicial system. He promised to reform in the judicial system. And the first thing he did after the elections was to nominate Avi Nissankorn, an extreme left-wing person. He was meant to do the reforms of Netanyahu in the judicial system. Come on. He lied about it. He lied about the budget during an economical crisis. He chose not to pass the budget that he promised he will. He lied about it. He lied to Gantz about the rotation. And then after he lost the trust of everybody, he ran to his new buddy, Mansour Abbas, in order to try and form some kind of cooperation with the Islamist movement, a sister movement of the Muslim Brotherhood, a sister movement of Hamas in Gaza. He even sent a vice minister to Ashraf in order to try and assist him in his elections. Now, how can you stand sitting and covering up for a person like that with zero ideology, with all the lies that he told to us? And obviously, Jeremy and Simcha speaking so much about a right-wing government and ideology under Prime Minister Netanyahu, but there's a zero ideology there. Okay.
Let's give Yehuda a chance to answer the question.
Okay.
Ren, nothing in the world is going to divide us. You are, in my eyes, one of the people I mostly admire as a member of Knesset. And I really miss you in the Likud, and I miss Zev Elkin and Gidon Sar and Dani Dayan and Michal Shir, and you're all really part of it. I'm here representing the Likud, and I'm here representing the diversity of the Likud. And I want to say that just the two examples you just gave right now. You said that Netanyahu didn't stop the annexation, and he didn't stop the reform in the judicial system. You are planning to sit together as your partner with, we just heard a few seconds ago, Ruth Lando Wasserman, her claim to pride. Look how great we are. We stopped the annexation, and we stopped the reform in the judicial system. So you're coming to us and you're saying, listen, Likud, you are so terrible. How are you going to go do such a thing?
It's not the Likud, but it's Bibi that has lied to everybody.
Sharon, 1 second. I'll give you a chance to respond.
So what you're claiming towards us, I'm not saying Netanyahu is perfect. I myself criticize him. That's no problem. But when I take the whole thing in a whole, and I really take the whole thing in a whole, I say, Sharon, how are you going to be cooperating as part of your direct partners with those who claim to pride was that they stopped the sovereignty project in Judea and Samaria, and they stopped the judicial reform system? How does that work together?
Sharon, just 20-second response.
20 seconds. So unfortunately, Bibi, and all this talk about sovereignty, Bibi has put it off the table because he signed agreements that are probably postponing it for at least 4 years. So any discussion about it is irrelevant because of Bibi, unfortunately. And so now we want to rehabilitate Israel's politics because of the lies that he spread through the political system. There's no trust between any of these parties. And I just don't understand how you, and it's not the Likud, it's Bibi, And I do respect you as a Knesset member and as a representative. You know how much I appreciate you and your ideology, and I know you've got a backbone. But when you speak about ideology and the leader time after time lies and do the exact opposite of what we aim and what we promised, then, you know, I would expect you to actually come to the real party that represent the right. I would expect Jeremy, and I would even expect Simcha Rotman, not Ben Gvir, but I would expect Simcha Rotman to actually join an ideological government, a government that has proven that it's got the representatives that has proven that their ideology comes first, that they have morals, that they have a backbone.
Let's give Simcha and Jeremy 30 seconds each just to comment because they were brought into that question. Simcha, 30 seconds just to respond to the Sharon's question.
First, I have to say, we can have a lot of praise to Benjamin Netanyahu, and we have some criticism, a lot of criticism even, on his behavior. The main reason to criticize, and I think on that Jeremy will agree with me, that as a rule, Netanyahu many times chose to invite to his governments left-wing parties, preferring them over right-wing parties. It's a big criticism. I will share this criticism with Jeremy, apparently with Sharon also, although she voted for this government and we did not. But I share, that's why I will never support, never, a right-wing leader that promises now that he will do exactly the very thing that I criticize Netanyahu on. If they tell me that they're going to build a right-wing government and they will invite to this government the left-wing parties of Yesh Atid and the Avodah and Meretz, and they have, I'll get all the worst thing that Netanyahu did without the benefits. What good idea? I don't understand the question and the idea behind that.
Okay, Jeremy, I want to give you, try to keep to 30 seconds if you can, just to answer Sharon's question.
Sharon, as you know, there's just, we're here to replace Bibi. To say that we're here to go ahead and give Bibi a 61.
You will not sit under his government?
It's ridiculous. What you, listen, when Lapid says, and when you say we're going to.
He's not answering, and that's the thing.
No, I'm answering. You don't like my answer.
No,
when Lapid and Sar say that we're giving Netanyahu 61, and then Netanyahu and Rotman say that we're giving Lapid 61, maybe I think the listeners and the viewers are very smart enough to understand that you're trying to make some political points. Naftali Bennett is running to be prime minister of Israel, and the last 3 polls that came out, Sharon.
With which parties? Which parties will be part of his government, Jeremy? Which parties?
This is my 30 seconds. I respect your 30 seconds. I will tell you that in the last 3 polls, we're now in 3rd place instead of Gidon Sar. I know that Zev Elkin said on the radio this morning, if this is the situation, you guys are obviously not going to form the government. So now it's time for you to come for us. That's fine. You can do that. Naftali Bennett is running to be the next prime minister of Israel. We are not here to give Lapid 61. We're not here to give Netanyahu 61. We're here to build 61 for Naftali Bennett.
Okay, I think everyone had their chances to, and we also saw from the facial expressions what people thought about what people were saying. So that will conclude that round. Let's go to
I actually didn't ask a question.
No, I mean that round of that question from Sharon.
Oh, okay.
Going now to Meretz and to Laura Wharton. You have an opportunity to ask another candidate a question. And we'd love again to have this dialogue, keeping our answers very quickly. I know that people who are watching are enjoying it as well.
Okay, I think actually I'm going to ask Sharon Eskev a question because I want to try to understand what kind of coalition she envisions that her party could be part of. Assume that and hope that you won't go into a coalition with the what's it called, the religious party, because they're clearly racist, support Kahana, the head of the party idolizes the mass murderer of Goldstein. So let's assume that they won't be in the government. I was wondering if you would be forming a government with the ultra-Orthodox parties, despite the fact that the government actually fell because they wanted to have exemptions for all the ultra-Orthodox yeshiva students and for a lot of other reasons. So I was wondering, what of the parties would you see being willing to form a government with the ultra-Orthodox parties, or with anyone else here?
So the first two parties that we will invite to form the government with us is Yesh Atid and Yamina. We would like to create a government of unity that will bring first of all stability to the people of Israel after 2 years of elections time after time. Everybody were here in the last elections and elections before that. Before Sar entered this race, there was no chance of replacing Bibi. Now there is a chance to build a different coalition. And it's a coalition that's going to be a unity coalition. We have our principles. Yes, we are a right-wing party, but we're a liberal party. And so our guideline to this party will invite all the Zionist parties who, first of all, want to rehabilitate Israel's economy. To your question,
the Orthodox parties are not Zionist.
I would consider some of them. They are part of some of these organizations, and they will be also invited on our terms. We are capable of being, if we will be strong enough, and it is true. If Israelis will not vote enough for Tikva Chadasha, there is a chance we will not be able to form this government, and that's why we are on a fight to call everybody to vote for us. But if we will be strong enough, we will also invite the Ultra-Orthodox, but on a contrary to Bibi, we don't have this sword hanging over our head. We will have other options. Unfortunately, from the last remarks from Nitzan Horowitz, it's definite that Meretz will not be part of this coalition. Definitely not from remarks that soldiers should be judged in the Hague court, which is very shameful.
That's not what he said. What he said was
like that.
Laura, I'll give you a chance. Laura, I'll give you a chance to respond. I'll give you a chance.
Okay, sorry.
So our coalition will be a unity, a Zionist coalition that's going to concentrate on bringing Israel back to it fits on the economic side and on the healthcare side.
Laura, you wanted to respond to something that was
I want to
said.
say first of all about Nitzan Horowitz's comments. You apparently didn't hear what he actually said because it's been misrepresented. He, of course, as did I, and other, were not saying that anything bad about Israeli soldiers. We're saying, on the contrary, we have perfect confidence in our soldiers, and that's why we're not afraid of the UN or the Hague or anything else. But in any case, that was not the question. The question was, would you form a government with the ultra-Orthodox parties, even though they're going to ask for a blanket exemption for all the yeshiva students and probably for additional billion shekels for the yeshivas, and probably also to continue the exemption from a minimum required curriculum as it always been in this country.
Saran, just a 20-second response.
As I said, we will invite it under our terms, not their terms. And if they will straighten with our terms, they will be invited in order to create stability. But if not, we don't have to have them in this coalition. There is other options as well. And if, with God will, we will be strong enough to form an alternative coalition to Netanyahu, I don't think that the Ultra-Orthodox will prefer to sit in the opposition than to give up on some of their issues, but to negotiate a certain coalition with them on our terms.
Okay, I think everyone was very clear in that back and forth. Let's go now to Yamina. Jeremy Sultan, you have opportunity to ask a question to another candidate, and let's try to have some back and forth on that as well.
Sure. My question is for Kinley, but before I get to Moshe, I just wanted to, comment 1 second on what Sharon said, because she said beforehand we're going to give Netanyahu 61, but then she said we're going to be the second call after Lapid into the Gideon Sar coalition. So that was just interesting for me. My question is to Moshe. I want to say, I'm a fan of the stuff you did with Torah, Neman V'Halacha, and you're talking about being a center party. You're talking about the Rambam. I really wish most of Yesh Atid was like you. I know in the past Yesh Atid was more to the center, and they are definitely, when I look at the entire list, practically besides you, a lot more to the center left. I wanted to ask you how you felt with Lapid's statements about the joint list, about, because you're a Zionist, and your party, of course, is a Zionist party. I'm not going to say it's not, but the fact that he's going ahead and he's putting it out there as it being okay for him to have a government that is going to have the support, again, even if it's from the outside, but knowing that the next time we have to go ahead and fight maybe Hezbollah in the north or Hamas in the south, what that means, how you feel that Yair Lapid is saying he's okay to have a government that is going to be relying from the outside with the support from the joint list.
Moshe, 1 minute if you can.
Yeah, so as I said, I'm a settler. I live in Kfar like Elazar Stern. I'm a religious Zionist. He used to be a general. I'm a lieutenant colonel still in the reserves. And on my first meeting with Yair Lapid almost 4 years ago, I told him we must have an Arab on list. And I'm very proud we have today Ibrahim Qasim, number 28 in the Yesh Atid party. So yes, I believe we have to have a joint venture of Israelis coming together. And this includes the Ultra-Orthodox and it includes the Arabs. And yes, part of the things, just a second, Jeremy, I'm getting there. Part of the things that are said by the Mishutefet are far from my cup of tea. And yet, some of the people leading the Mishutefet are good partners. So we could find ourselves in the coming government with some part of Mishutefet with us, or at least out, as you said, from the out part of the government. And I'm saying exactly the same thing about Shas and Yadut HaTorah, because if you'd look at Yesh Atid at the last year, led by Yair Lapid, you'd see a much more centered and warming, bringing in wider parts of the Israeli Chevra, and that includes Arabs, and that includes, now, look, we're talking about Netanyahu, who's now negotiating with Mansour Abbas, which is something we in Yesh Atid wouldn't do. Things are changing in Israel, most of them, I think, for good. I deeply believe we should have a government in this coming elections. We should form a government with Arabs inside it. I can't sign on any part of the Mishutefet, but yes, I would hope having both Mishutefet on the one side and parts of the Ultra-Orthodox, Shas and Yadut Torah, with us in our government, but they will have to come into center to our liberal and Zionist government. That's our way.
Moshe, just to clarify, you're equating the Haredi parties with the joint list, and second, you're not excluding Balad from Chadash and Ta'al. I mean, of course, we know, Azmi Bashara and all of the rest there.
Moshe,
I was talking about part of Meshutefet. I was talking about part of Meshutefet, not all of it. I'm saying comes into Yesh Atid's government to join our Zionist, liberal, pluralistic way. And that goes for all sides. To form a government, people will have to fit in with you if they want to be part of it.
I think all sides were very clear.
Which part of the Meshutefet is Zionist? Just to give the example, what do you mean when you say Zionist government?
I said one name I won't sit with, that is Itamar Ben Gvir, as you know very well.
So he is the only one in the Knesset that is not Zionist enough for you. Ayman Uda is ex.
No, he's the only.
Yazbak is ex. Only Itamar Ben Gvir is the problem for you.
He's the only one. He's the only one I mentioned. He's the only one I mentioned because he didn't serve in the army and he's been doing racist, doing racist things. So I can't sit with him. There are also MPs from other places.
All generals, everyone there.
I didn't say all of them.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone has made their opinions very clear. Let's go to the last question for this round, and then we're going to go to 1 minute closing statements from everyone as we head towards the end. But I want to give Yehuda Glick from the Likud Party the opportunity to ask another candidate a question.
Thank you very much. It really is so much, very exciting to listen to all of you. You're so really doing a wonderful job. And you too, Dov, you're doing a wonderful job as moderator. It's wonderful to be part of this whole group. I want to once again go back to my dear friend Sharon Haskell, who I there's so much love and admire, and I want to, sometimes what's good about human beings is that they can reconsider and they can rethink. Your criticism over Netanyahu, some of it is very justified, even though I don't always agree with it. For instance, the question about the sovereignty. Well, I want to remind you, was also prevented by the extreme right. The Moechet Yesha attacked Netanyahu and stopped it. There was a lot of issues there. But I want you to, after you take over the criticism you have about Netanyahu, you are not part of those who are part of the anti-Bibi religion. Because some of these people were anti-Bibi way before all these stories that you're talking about. Listen to some of the people that are talking in this election campaign. How much hate we see. Hate against Haredim, hate against Ben Gvir, hate against Mishutef, hate against Arabs. There's so much hate running around in these elections. Do you really think that Netanyahu is worse than all these people who are expressing hate? And I don't want to repeat the hate. Do you really think that you can take over? I mean, and I want to remind you that you've announced you're not going to be sitting under Lapid. You're not going to be part of Ben Gvir. Not going to be part with Meretz. Not going to be part with the joint party. Not with Netanyahu. So you, Tikva Hadasha and Bennett together are going to make the next government with Kachol Lavan as well. I mean, I really want to understand. Is there any point where you can stop and say, let's rethink it? Maybe in spite of the criticism, the best thing is not to go to a fifth election, but to be part of a government where you can have some kind of influence.
Sharon, just unmute and you can answer the question in 1 minute if you can.
1 minute. Okay. Yehuda, we're not speaking out of hate. We speak from a place of a great disappointment from Netanyahu. Gideon Saar served Netanyahu 3 years when he did amazing things for Israel. But unfortunately, the Netanyahu that we see today is only a shade of the person that he was. He keeps on lying to everybody in the political sphere. How can you create a government that is not built on trust, or that you can't trust your partners? And how can you believe that a person that was so concerned about Israel's economy chose not to pass a country's budget during an economical crisis? I mean, there was red lines that were crossed that we could not agree with it anymore. And we came out in order to make that change, to change Bibi, to change Netanyahu. And we know that Saar is the only one that can do that change. No one else in the political arena can make that change. Only Gideon Saar can unite people from the right and maybe even Likud members. I hope Likud members will join this government. And people, yes, also from the left, also Yair Lapid, and maybe Blue and White, and maybe other members, to form a government that will, first of all, unite the people. I know how much unity is important to you as a person, not just as a representative. But Gideon Saar is the only one that can create unity. He's the only one that can create stability. Otherwise, we're going to end up with more of the same lies, promises that are broken, crossing lines on what's good for our country in order to place a personal interest there. And we cannot allow that to happen. It comes from a sense of disappointed and responsibility for our country and for our people.
I think the back and forth there was pretty clear. Yehuda, do you have one last point you want to make? Otherwise,
I just want to say that I specifically said, Sharon, and that you and Gideon do not come from hate. But I think that you're being hijacked by those who are their cause is hate, and you're becoming part of it, and even justifying it by partnering with them.
Sharon, 10-second response.
We are not part of the hate. We are part of our duty, of why we enter politics, in order to protect our country, to protect our people, to do what's best for it. This is what leads us.
Okay, we are ready for the closing statements. Everyone is going to have just 1 minute, and I do ask that you keep to the 1 minute just to make your final pitch. You're telling voters this is why you should vote for your party. We'll go in reverse alphabetical order. So the first closing statement goes to Laura Wharton of the Meretz Party. 1 minute, please.
Okay. I want to start with this, that these elections are not about who's going to be prime minister. These elections in this country are about what party we want to have and feels best represents our values. And I think we have to think about two things. One is what our red lines are, what is not acceptable. I think racism is not acceptable. And people who are forgiving towards the cruel end up being cruel towards those who need to be protected. And therefore, I think these red lines are important. But what I think we should also be thinking about when we think of who we're going to vote for is who represents the values that we want. I think Meretz represents the values that a lot of people here share ultimately, and we've been able to put them into effect by dealing with all the values that we have. We believe in social justice, we believe in equality, we believe in investing in the people of this country to make it a better, stronger country. And we give hope. A lot of most of the parties here representative were in the last several governments that were a total failure. We represent something different. We're hoping to be in this coalition in the next government that's formed, and we want to pursue the values of honesty, good government, community, and caring for those people who need our care above all.
Thank you so much, Laura. Yesh
You're very
Atid, Moshe Torpaz, member of Knesset, your closing statement, 1 minute.
Thank you. So I really believe these elections are about one thing, and that is trust. The people of Israel have lost their trust in the government, and the government was led by Netanyahu for the last 12 years isn't trustworthy anymore. Now, Yesh Atid will form the next government with some of the partners here. We have the best team working with Yair Lapid, and I've learned over the years, look who's the team around the leader, and then you understand who the is. I think we need the same government. We need a liberal government and who's in it. And that's Yesh Atid will form in these coming elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Labor Party, former member of Knesset Nachman Shai, with your closing statement for 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dov, and thank you, everyone. I think that what I see here is a lack of ideology in the upcoming elections. And that's why I feel that our party has a special role in the next round. I hope this is the last one for the next few years. And there's a lot of family discussions here between Amina and Tikva Chadasha and Tikva Yeshana, and they're all coming from the same family. So I really don't see any difference. I don't see any difference. I can hardly, maybe personal differences, but I would like to hear more about ideology, which again I would like to praise Laura for bringing those values into this discussion. I'm very proud of the way Merav built or rebuilding the Labour Party. We are starting a new stage in our history. You guys and the audience that I don't see remember very well what the Labour used to be. This is the party that built the country. This is the country. This is the party that produced the economic, the security, the social assets of and political and diplomatic assets of this country. And I'm sure that we are now going to the place where we can play a much more central role in the history of Israel. It will take some time because we are coming, as I said before, from almost nothing. I believe in the ideology of the Labour Party. I believe in the leadership. And I believe that at the end of the day, the voters who are coming to decide 2 years from now who is going to lead the country will trust Labour. Labour is not going to be in the same coalition with the Likud, not going to give again another chance to Netanyahu. This is over. We'll stay in the opposition. We'll do our job from the opposition line if necessary. But I hope very much that we all be able to open a new chapter in the history of Israel, which means the end of Netanyahu's term. Thank you.
Thank you, Nachman. Closing statement for Yamina. Jeremy Sultan, you have 1 minute.
Bet for Bennett. we hear a lot of statements from a lot of politicians. There's one leader, there's one person who's above everything else, and that's Naftali Bennett. Over the last 10 months, where we had a colossal failure of the government, the one person who went out into the field, on the ground, heard the problems, came up with concrete plans, literally wrote a book on how to go ahead and defeat the coronavirus and how to put the economy back, that man was Naftali Bennett. There are three groups in this election. There's the only Bibi group, there's the anybody but Bibi group, and then there's Naftali Bennett. If you guys want to make sure that there's no fifth election, if you want to vote for someone who actually has concrete policies, if you care about that idea of lowering the corporate tax to 15% so that we bring in 400,000 new jobs, that we freeze the public sector and go ahead and see a revitalization of the private sector. If you want to, again, have more money in your pocket by reducing income tax by 15 to 20%, if you want to see the corona go to 0 cases so that in the next election, which is hopefully in 4 years, we won't be having it on Zoom, vote Naftali Bennett. Bet for Bennett.
Thank you, Jeremy. Religious Zionist Party, Simcha Rotman, 1 minute for your closing statement.
Okay, I was almost convinced by Jeremy's speech, and then I remembered that all those good peoples and plans were actually in the government when they offered those plans. So when Naftali Bennett, who was the Minister of Education, so from 2015 to 2019, offers a plan of restart to education, I asked myself, what stopped him for 4 years from restarting education? And all those good, great ideas. So plans are amazing. If you don't do them, you can always keep the plan for the next election and the next election. And that's what we will have if we will try to continue the, I want to be a prime minister, or I won't sit with this, I won't sit with that. If you want ideology, if you want not to put aside your values because someone is running to sit in Balfour, or someone is running to kick someone out from Balfour, if you want the religious Zionist values of nation, state, a country, and Torah, and if you want all the things that we waited for so long to happen, to have a right-wing government, to reform the justice system and not to put it aside, to build in Judea and Samaria and not to put it aside, and to bring Jewish identity to the state of Israel and not put that aside for anyone or for any person, Tzionut Datit is your party. Vote Tet.
Thank you very much. I do want to mention that Ruth Rossamalandi from the Blue and White Party had to leave a little bit earlier, but we certainly thank her for her participation. Closing statement from New Hope, former member Knesset Sharon Haskel. You have 1 minute. Sharon, just take yourself off mute.
You'll have to continue and say it every time. First of all, thank you so much, Dov, for this very interesting panel. I'm sure everybody really enjoyed it. Look, we are in a battle at the moment in order to receive as many votes from Israelis. Our goal is to bring back stability to Israel after 2 years of elections after elections. There's a chance to end it. And Gideon Sa'ar is the only one that can replace the current failed government who didn't know how to manage our economy, who didn't know how to manage the health crisis. But we need a strong Tikva Chadasha in order to do that. And I'm saying that with a lot of concern, because if Tikva Chadasha is not going to be big enough, there's two options. One option is that Bibi will continue to be the prime minister, as you've heard before, and continue with the failed policies and with promises that he will never fulfill. And the other option is that we might go into even a 5th round of elections. And unfortunately, and that's why I asked you to vote and support Tikva Chadasha. If you want to do that change, if you want to bring stability back to our life here in Israel, if you want someone that will be able to manage the economic crisis, the health crisis that we're in, vote Tikva Chadasha.
Thank you so much, Sharon. In the spirit of the dialogue back and forth, before we get to Yehuda's closing statement, there was an attack against one party in the closing statements. We're giving Jeremy Sultan 10 seconds that he requested, 10 seconds to answer something that was attacked to his party.
Bennett was
I
a
can
great.
attack him again if he wants extra 10 seconds. I will attack him again. No problem.
Thanks. Bennett has achievements, and the thing is, we don't recycle our plans because we do stuff. The lower classrooms, lower amount of kids per classroom, that was something Bennett said he did. He talked about the Bet Sefer Shel HaChugim, having shorter recess and being able to have more time for the parents to be able to send their kids. These are all things that he did. The restart in education is to continue the stuff that we already did during the 4 years that he was education minister.
Thank you for the clarification. Former member Knesset Yehuda Glick, Likud Party, the final closing statement. 1 minute, please.
Wow, I really want to conclude with less politics if possible. And I think we proved tonight that we can have a civilized discussion, inclusive discussion, a dialogue without hate. And I really feel that our country today, more than anything, is striving for inclusiveness, to lower the levels of the hate among people. I'm very sad that the Haredim, the Ultra-Orthodox party, were not here tonight. I'm sure they were invited. I don't know why they didn't participate, but
Everyone was invited.
I wanted to, and that same thing, I'm so happy that Prime Minister Netanyahu just announced that he's going to have an Arab minister in the next government. And he appointed Nail Zouabi, who is, I recommended in 2018, I publicly called to appoint him as a minister. I think it's time for inclusiveness. It's time for us to not to agree, but to understand that the other side is not illegitimate, and to stop banning. And I could one final sentence. I want to call upon all those who will be elected. In a few months, there's going to be election for a position for somebody who is going to try to reduce the hate in this country. And I definitely strongly recommend to vote Yehuda Glick for Israel's next president, both for the interior issues and for the foreign affairs, with the world, Israel as a model state, a light upon the nations, with a country that lowers the level of hate and increases the level of light and inclusiveness. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yehuda. Maybe we'll ask Telfed to arrange a debate amongst the candidates for president when that time comes. I do want to say thank you to all the candidates. One of the things that all of us have learned in the Knesset is that there's a lot of politics, a lot of debate, but there's a lot of camaraderie behind the scenes. And I think that viewers tonight got to see that. I'm proud to be here as a representative of the Confederation of United Zionists, which also seeks to bring all people together around the idea of Zionism. Most importantly, we want to thank Telfed for arranging this event and for all that they do. And therefore, just to close off tonight, I'll give it back to Teddy from Telfed. And thank you, everyone, for a wonderful discussion. Teddy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you so much, Dov. You've done a splendid job. And I think that all the spokespersons have expressed themselves, and let's hope we're now more clear which direction we're going in. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I just wanted to invite you all that Telfed does have two major events a month. Our next event will be on the 16th of March. It's a Tuesday at 8 p.m. It's a fascinating lecture about cybersecurity with May Brooks. If you're able to join, please look at the Telfed website and join us. Once again, a good night to all, and thank you all for joining us this evening. And Gendorf, thank you so much for your efforts and for spending of your time. And thank you all to all the panelists. Good night to you.
Thanks to Telfed and to Dov Lippman for really handling this very well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone else who participated.
I want to say this was the best organized, the best moderated. Thank you, Gil.
Oh, you were wonderful. I can agree.
Absolutely.
Jeremy, I agree. Absolutely.
My pleasure.
Well done.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.